it's a journey because it's for you to really understand who are you in each of your phases and also accept that and also talk openly about it. It's not something that we're used to. So I think the main point is really like just be curious, and if you're curious, you're automatically going to start looking for it, and you're going to start trying to see patterns and see things that you're experiencing and exchanging with people, and then from there it's just going to go. Yeah, it's just like you're going to automatically dive into this journey. But
28-ish days, so true. Womb wisdom, old and new. 28-ish days, so true. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it.
I think we should.
Yeah, let's talk about it. Yeah.
All right, we're talking about it.
Yeah.
Welcome to the 28ish podcast, where hormones, femtech, and womb wisdom come together with daily life. Here, we share and celebrate your stories. Through the lens of menstrual cycle awareness, we get into the impactful work being done in these fields and the vibrant lives being shaped by this knowledge. Join us as we uncover how understanding our cycles can transform our bodies and our world. I'm your host, Carrie McKinnon, and if you've got a story to share with us, get in touch at www.28ish.com. Hi, Maja.
hi.
Welcome. I'm so excited to have you here and get to know you a little bit today and find out all about you and the work you're doing.
Thank you. Excited to be here as well. Thank you for having me.
Could you please start by sharing a little bit about your personal journey with menstrual cycle awareness and how it's impacted your life? You can talk professionally, personally, both of those, please.
Sure. I think it started personally in the sense of I took the pill for many years. So like as soon as I started sexual intercourse in how old was I, 16, 17 or something like that. It was kind of a given to start taking the pill. It was never questioned. It was never like really informed about it. So it was just like a given. You just have to start taking the pill. So I took the pill until 2018, and then I was going through a major self-reflection period and everything, and I was having the feeling that I just kind of wanted to stop taking it. I even went to a Chinese medicine doctor and told him that, and I was like, why do you want to get out of the pill? And I was like, I don't know, I just have the feeling that I have to, because I just want to see what it does to me if I stop taking it.
Yeah.
And then he was super supportive of that idea. So in 2018, I stopped taking the pill, and then I started realizing a few changes in my body. I think one of the main changes that I felt was actually the libido. But then like with time, I kind of started getting curious about the cycle, and then in the beginning of 2019, I got my first book about the topic, which was The Red Moon by Miranda Gray. You probably know that one. And then it was funny because right then I was kind of starting to read more about the subject and getting into it. And then I was same time looking for a job. And then I actually found a job as a marketing manager in a startup that was just starting with plastic-free period products here in Zurich. So I'm based in Zurich, Switzerland, for the listeners.
Wonderful.
And then I started working for them like 2 weeks before their launch. And then I just kind of got immersed in the topic, of course. So I was already kind of with this personal interest, but then kind of joined with my professional career. And then I started reading about it, talking to people about it. And then I just saw that there's this massive gap of knowledge. And simultaneously, I was actually also on my more personal side, but also using a little bit professionally. I was starting more with photography because it's something that I have been kind of having in the back of my mind for a few years back then. And then I started kind of developing the photography in parallel with this job, marketing job at the startup. And then I just like had this idea that eventually I wanted to do something with photography with the subject to actually kind of raise more awareness about the topic using photography as a means for that. But then 2020, pandemic hits. I got fired. I had a massive life change. So I actually became a self-employed nomad photographer in a nutshell. Because at the same time that I got fired because of the pandemic, because they were cutting costs and everything, I also had decided that I was going to leave the apartment that I had in Zurich behind because I wanted to travel more. Anyway, it was like a huge breakthrough, let's put it that way. So it shifted my life completely. And then I just like packed everything, put everything in a storage here in Zurich, and then starting working with photography only. And then that was like 3.5 years that I've been kind of moving a lot with the photography. So 2 years from these 3.5 years were mainly focused on photography of hotels. So I was living in the hotels in an average of 10 days. So every 10 days I was pretty much moving.
Wow. For 3 years?
For mainly 2 years. And then
2 years.
beginning of 2022, I said, okay, I need to make a change in my lifestyle because it's just not sustainable in a physical and mental health perspective.
Wow. Yeah.
And of course, this lifestyle was having a huge impact on my menstrual cycle as well. So, and then in 2022, I kind of started, okay, I need to make changes in my lifestyle. I need to have some kind of new change. And then for 1 year, so until the June 23, I was kind of still figuring out. I went to Brazil because my parents live in Brazil, and that's where I actually grew up. I went to Brazil for a few months, did some other kinds of jobs, then came back to Europe, work in Portugal with something completely different again. And then in June 23, I remember, it was really funny because before we actually started recording, you said about like, you remember exactly the precise time when you said, this is it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I had a similar moment I was sitting with a friend in Holland. We spent there like a prolonged weekend. And then we're sitting on a coffee and I was like, I don't really know what I'm gonna do next. I'm still kind of figuring out the next steps, the next projects and everything. I was a bit lost in a professional way because I knew that the hotel nomad, which was the whole hotel photography thing that I was doing, just wasn't sustainable for my lifestyle anymore. And I needed and wanted to change that. So I was like, yeah, I'm not really sure what I'm going to do next. And then I have no idea how we went to the topic, but then I started talking about this idea that I had in the back of my mind back from 2019 of using photography to raise awareness about the menstrual cycle. Because by then my menstrual cycle was also all over the place. So like sometimes it would come and then it would be like 3 months without, and then it would come like in a normal 30-ish day cycle, and then it would be for 2 months, and then it would not come again for like 3 months. So it was like completely irregular. Yeah. So yeah, I was talking to her in that coffee shop, and then I mentioned to her, and then she looked at me and she's like, look, if you don't do it for us, like for our generation, then please do it for the girls that are coming in the next generation, because I have a lot of friends having babies and having mainly girls. So I have like a lot of girls coming up, either like that were just born or that are already like in the age of 4 or 5 years old.
Yeah.
And then she was like, okay, if you don't do it for us, then do it for them. And in that moment, I was like, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then that's when I actually started developing the idea a bit further. And then I spent the whole summer last year writing the project design and kind of elaborating the idea a bit further. Back then in July 23, I was in Zurich, but only for a few weeks. I was already starting all of that. And then I decided that I wanted to actually create an association because I thought I didn't want to kind of make a lot of profit from it. I saw it more as a social change rather than like, I want to profit from it and I just want to make money out of it. So I decided that it was going to be an association. I started like writing everything down, and then but I still didn't really know if that was really going to happen or not. I was like looking for fundings. And then in the meantime, I decided to go to Indonesia to learn how to free dive, which is something completely different.
Nice.
But then there I was like, okay, I kind of need to do that. And even if I don't get the funding by October, I'm still going to do it. And it has to start in the beginning of December, like in the middle of December, which is actually the beginning of winter. So to symbolically actually start in the first day of the cycle, of a new cycle. So I kind of still went to Australia, and then I decided to come back to Switzerland to actually start the association year. So I arrived in Switzerland in the beginning of winter, which people like still tell me like, are you crazy? Like you were in Indonesia, you were in Australia, now you're coming to Switzerland, the worst time ever in the beginning of winter to like start something completely new. And I was like, well, I don't know, I just had to.
Nice.
Yeah, and then I came in November. I kind of put the papers on to initiate the association. Now it's created, and now we're actually making it happen. So that's pretty much how kind of it shifted between the personal, professional,
Yeah.
and then it just kind of combined everything together. And I think that's the thing that probably happens the most in this kind of environment. I think like you have this personal experience, and then you end up kind of combining it with a professional way, and then it just kind of creates whatever it creates. So
Yeah.
that was a long story about my experience with the menstrual cycle.
It was beautiful. I want to take it all the way back though for you. Like, so you're in Zurich now, and you were in Zurich before and you left. You talk about being put on the pill like immediately. Is that a thing where you're from? Like, is that like what was that about? Was that a family thing, a society thing?
I think it was everything together. I mean, so yeah, I grew up in Brazil, in São Paulo,
Okay.
and there it was just like, I mean, I didn't get any kind of education about my period, about my menstrual cycle. It was just kind of like, you bleed, these are the products that you can use, and
Yeah.
that's it. Like there
Yeah.
was no actual education about what is the cycle, what happens with your hormones. Like,
Sure.
I
It's
mean,
still like that here in the States. I don't
exactly.
know
And I
about
think
Switzerland
no,
or Brazil.
I think
Here
it's
it's
the
still like that.
same.
Yeah.
Exactly. I think it's the same. And and that's why like everyone that I talk about this subject, everyone experiences the same thing. And then you start finding out about your cycle when you're in your 30s,
Yeah.
which is like 15 years later than when you actually started menstruating, which is
Yeah.
insane.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're
Well,
almost leading to perimenopause already, which is another subject that you're still trying to figure out about your cycle.
yeah. Yeah. Well, that's why I asked that question, because one of the things we're doing this season on the podcast is really exploring different like cultural perceptions
Mm,
around the menstrual cycle and how it's dealt with in different cultures. And in
mm,
your case, you've been exposed not just to, Brazilian culture around it, and then the culture in Switzerland around it, but also like you did a lot of travels when you were deep in reflection and already like menstrually aware. Do you have any
mm.
insight from that, like cultural insights of like how this is dealt with across cultures in your experience?
Yeah, I think, I mean, it's a little bit what you said. At the end of the day, I think we're all experiencing similar things,
Uh-huh.
in the sense of kind of the places that I've been or the people that I've talked to. I just see this massive gap of knowledge. The story about the pill, I know about Brazil that is very like, in our generation at least, it was just like, okay, you start having sexual intercourse, so you just take the pill and that's it. Like there's no questions or
Mm.
whatever. And I feel like here in Switzerland, it was very much the same, like with the people that I talk about it here. In other cultures, I mean, there is still like this shame that goes together with it. I think I'm trying to think, but like for example, it was really interesting when I was in Indonesia. I was talking to a local there, and she was still on her 20s. I think she's like 23 or something.
Mm-hmm.
And then one day I was talking to her and she was in her period and she was like, "Yeah, I know I'm on my period and I'm feeling so bad." And then I was like, "Well, it's just part of it. Kind of like, you just kind of have to embrace that and just kind of embrace yourself for not being at your top highest performance right now. Like, your body is going through an inflammation. So you kind of, you need to kind of embrace that and just kind of take care of yourself." And she was like, "Yeah, but it's really annoying that I'm just like, I myself only once a month, like 1 week a month." And I was like, "Hold up." Let's talk about that. Yeah, and then I started explaining to her, I was like, "Look, it's not that you're yourself only 1 week a month. Like, you're everything. You're the whole month, but you just have to figure out who you are in each part of it. It's not that
Mm.
the week that maybe you're a bit lower in energy, that's a bad thing, that's not you. That's still you. But
Yeah.
you just have to understand, who is that person? What do you need when you're in that state?" Because this belief of having that we're only ourselves 1 week a month, and that's probably the week around ovulation or a little bit before ovulation, that we're like, we can conquer the world and we can do
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
I mean, that's and it was interesting to see that thinking, even in Indonesia, everyone is experiencing very similar things because that's the way it is, right? Like that's the way how a lot of the societies grow up. But I have to say I don't have that much experience with like completely different. Well, that was also interesting in Indonesia. If you that was also another experience, I guess, that I can say from a cultural perspective in the religious ceremonies, or in the temples there. In a lot of the places, you cannot go in or you cannot attend if you have your periods.
Mm.
So there's a lot
Yeah.
of the celebrations that they have. They ask you, like, even I participated, for example, in a cremation ceremony there. And the guy that took me, like the local that took me, he's like, "It would really, really nice if you can come, but I need to ask you, are you in your period? Like, do you have your period? Are you bleeding?" And I was like, "No." He's like, "Okay, then it's fine, then you can come because otherwise you couldn't come." So there is still this belief that when you have your menstruation, you cannot attend certain things.
Yeah.
I didn't go that much into topic, but then it was also super interesting. One situation that I saw, I was just driving to maybe enter a temple. I ended up not entering it, but
Yeah.
in front of the temple, there were like a group of teenager tourists. It was, I don't know, like probably 15 or 20 teenagers. I think they were American or Australian, not sure. And they had the teacher with them and they were like organizing everything to go in, and then they had to put like a certain how do you call it, like like kind of the when you have to cover your legs, and then you have that cloth that they just kind of bind it around it.
Oh,
I don't know,
like
I
an
forgot the
apron or
name.
something?
Yeah, kind of like an
Yeah.
apron.
Like when
Yeah.
you're
And then
cooking.
yeah, but it's more like on the downside. So like it's kind of
Okay.
like a yeah, I forgot the name now. But anyway, you just kind of had to, because they
Yeah.
were using shorts and everything, so you kind of have to cover it
Oh,
everything because you
yeah.
it's
Yeah,
not,
like
you
some
shouldn't
kind
go
of
in with the naked.
modesty, like a modesty cloth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
And
then
they put,
they were like getting themselves prepared to enter the temple and putting everything that they had to put as a, to respect the place. And then I saw that there was a group of girls that were standing on the side, and then they were like kind of complaining that they didn't could come in. So it
yeah.
was because they had their period, but they were actually feeling ashamed that they had to say that, and then that the whole group knew that they were actually menstruating on that day. So the teacher just asked them, like, "Is anyone menstruating? So you can't come in." And then they were like, "Well, yeah, I am." But then I heard them saying, like, "Yeah, it's really annoying. Now everyone knows that we're bleeding. Like, why do we need to say that?"
Yeah.
And now we can't go in. And I was like, "Oh wow, like that's
Yeah.
crazy."
were these Indonesian youth or like for like tourists?
No, foreigners. They're tourists. So I
Tourists.
think they
Yeah.
were Australian, if I'm not mistaken. So
Okay.
they're speaking
It's
English, perfect
yeah.
English.
So it's like culture clash time when you're observing that, right? Big time. This
Exactly.
whole discussion, it's very interesting. I'd love to speak to someone in Indonesia about it from the Indonesian perspective, because I know that, like, where I came to menstrual cycle awareness was in Morocco. And, that's a Muslim country. And there you can't go into the mosque if you're bleeding as well. And, Ramadan is coming up in a couple days from now. When you have your period, you don't fast. And so what I've found is that it actually makes more space for the cycle. It's not a like, let's act like it's not happening. It doesn't exist and we have to be normal all the time, but it normalizes menstrual cycles on some level. And people feel differently about it, obviously, right? Like menstruators feel sometimes, like left out by certain things, but also like kind of, in my perspective, like I think people are feeling, when I see like my own daughters, for example, they feel like, a sense of relief, right? When they don't have to do certain things because they have their
Yeah,
cycle.
especially like the fasting, which is, I mean, you shouldn't fast when you're menstruating because, I mean, you're already releasing so much energy and your body is working with so much. And then if you still fast, like your body can go in a lot of deficiencies if you do that, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And it's also this thing of like, so even outside of religious holidays, them religious acts, then that carries into like, in my observations, women having more of like the empowerment to be like, I am different today. I am bleeding. I'm not going to show up looking the same at work. I'm not going to show up socially the same way. I'm bleeding. That means I rest and I don't wear makeup today, And like, that was a huge adjustment for me going into like adapting to Moroccan culture, because I was so like from this American Western, like we show up the same. Yeah. How dare you not work as hard? Like what? You're setting us back. No, like they're actually working differently, which is really what really triggered a lot of curiosity for me about about the menstrual cycle and menstrual cycle awareness. Cause I'm like, oh, wow. Okay. There's a different way I could take space too for myself. So it would be really interesting to know the kind of justification, or not justification, reasoning, I guess, behind these Indonesian practices. And and also like the family dynamics that leads into, right? Like, because like the Ramadan example, like the men in the family know if the woman's not if she's not fasting.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and it's okay. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, it's quite interesting. Like, but I think there's different aspects. I completely agree with you in the sense of like, accepting that maybe then you shouldn't be like, that you should give yourself the space and you should like be more inwards than like being in a place full of people and like, in that sense. But I do see as well, like I've seen some documentaries and read a few also stories about this culture thing. Where I see a bit the problem is the thing about kind of seeing as impure. So that's one of the topic in a lot of cultures, that they see the menstruation as something impure, that you're not good enough if you're actually bleeding, or that's seen as a negative thing. It's hard because a cultural thing, it's really hard for you to kind of blame or like shame or like talk badly about it, because that's their beliefs and they have their reasons to believe that. But I think there is a bit, for me personally, I find it a bit tricky. I mean, also in India, I've read about it, like there's also I think a documentary about it as well, where they have these huts also outside of the villages, that the menstruating women, when they're bleeding, they're put in these huts, which have zero sanitary infrastructure. And they had people die in these huts because they didn't get what they needed, because they were just like excluded of everything. And it's just like, just stay there. There's like barely any light. There's like no sanitation, there's no anything.
Yeah.
And that I find it a bit tricky.
Oh, it's terrible. I mean,
Yeah.
it's quite far also from the whole red tint concept, isn't it? Which the whole
But
red
I
tint
think, I mean, the
thing,
red tint, yeah.
yeah, that's a not a great red tint to be in, it sounds like.
Exactly.
Yeah, and yeah, the impurity thing is, it's a real thing. I mean, and it extends into things like cooking as well.
Exactly.
I'm just always also really careful with like, okay, yeah, where how are we gonna balance this line here of like not seeing everything through a Western lens and being open to like what the beliefs are around it, at the same time listening to how administrators feel experiencing it daily as well, like, or monthly at least, experiencing this. And that it's contradictory is what I've come to believe. It's complex, and there's
Yeah,
emotions
exactly.
on both sides of it. I did some interviews in Morocco last summer, in a little village, and one of the things that was mentioned was food, that the girls did not, they didn't feel good that they couldn't like cook food. They were encouraged not to cook food, and they're like, but why? Like, it was hard for them to accept that,
To understand.
so yeah, very complex.
Yeah, but yeah, and I think it's like there's all kinds of shades of gray, right? In that sense,
Yeah.
like there's so many, and there's so many different cultures. Like the other day as well, I think it was in our, I'm not sure if it was in our focus group. I think it was. Ah, no, it was in another conversation. I went to a women's circle. Yeah, exactly. And then one of the women shared that it was very interesting. I don't remember where was she from. I think it was maybe the Philippines.
Okay.
Not completely sure, but she said that her mom was from that culture, but she
Mhm.
was born and raised here in Switzerland. But they have a tradition that in the menarche and the first menstruation,
Mhm.
they actually take part of the blood and then they kind of spread it on the face,
Oh wow.
as a kind of a ritual to, like, it's not seen as an impure thing, but more like kind of, you entered this phase of your life and now you're fertile, and it's kind of like there's a whole ritual that her mom did for her, which is beautiful. But she said, like, she never told that to anyone because, like, how would people here in the Western world
Yeah.
react to that
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
you get, like, blood spread in your face, and like this whole kind of
Yeah.
ritual that is completely not normal for us, right? Because for us it's kind of, oh, you got your days, okay, here are some menstrual products, and that's it. So
Yeah.
there are cultures that actually see that as a beautiful thing and as a
Yep.
ritual passage and as a thing to kind of celebrate. And it is something beautiful. Like, it is a moment that you actually become fertile, right? Like, that's the menstruation is all about that.
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
so yeah,
Yeah.
it's interesting to see all these differences around the
There's
world. So
It's handled very differently. Yeah, I agree. And Morocco, again, my introduction to that whole like different than Western cultural perspective on it was indeed from a country where, yeah, they do celebrate. Like, they'll give dates and milk, and they'll be like
nice.
chanting or singing when you first get it, like, and
Wow,
not
that's
across the
beautiful.
board and not all families, but many, many families, at least the dates and milk and the kind of like
Yeah.
chants, to like make them feel special. I actually, one of my first months in Morocco, I was at a hammam, and a young girl was in, and suddenly, like, the hammam, I mean, you're all in there like naked together getting scrubbed, right, already. So I had to get like a comfort level with that. It was challenging for me, but I did. And then there's this young girl, and she's getting scrubbed on the table, and like suddenly the entire place, and these are strangers, like burst out singing, and the women that were scrubbing her started it, and everyone was singing and calling their chants and like then drumming on stuff, and it was like you're in this like full tile room, so it's a lot of echo. And it was because she had gotten her first period. She had reached
Oh,
menarche.
I got all my
I know. And
goosebumps.
it was like it was the first hammam after the menarche. And I guess the mom had told the women scrubbing her, like, she's got,
I see.
and so they celebrated it. And I mean, I just cried. Like, it was so like, Oh, I can't believe I just got to witness that. It was so cool.
That's beautiful.
And
yeah.
the women just really enjoyed making a moment of it, and like celebrating her that way. But then, yeah, if anyone is listening to this out there, please, if you're from a culture that deals with the menstrual cycle or like tells you can't do a religious thing or cultural thing, or please let us know. We want you on here. We want to find out and explore this deeper always.
Yeah, because I think there's so many cultures that we're not aware of. Like it's so interesting. It's really fascinating. It would be interesting really to have like a series of like people from all over the world telling their experience and their rituals and everything. It would be super interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, so I'm ready to hear about unboxing cycles and the work you're doing, because I did, in researching you and in seeing unboxing cycles, you mention art and like menstrual art, and that just really touched me. I don't know if you've ever like seen this or what kind of menstrual art you're talking about, so I do want to hear it. But what immediately came to my mind is this artist that I got really into for a while that does paints with her menstrual blood.
Oh yeah,
that's really cool.
That's a fun one. Yeah.
Is that the kind of art you're talking about, or a different?
No, it's definitely not the type of art that I'm talking about.
Okay.
There are indeed like many super inspiring artists. There's also one, I think it's called the Vulva Gallery on Instagram as well, which is also super nice. I don't know if you've seen her.
I haven't, but I'll check it out.
Yeah, check it out. So she has interviews with the women, and then she looks at their vulva and like she draws each vulva.
Okay.
But after really looking at them, and then she makes kind of a portrait of the vulva. So it's also quite interesting how she goes into it and really showing how each one is unique. I mean, it's more about the vulva than the menstrual cycle, but still it's kind of part of the body, right? Like it's part of the whole combination of things. But no, like I think unboxing cycles, it's actually it's a combination of a lot of different things. And I think for me personally, I see it as a project that actually brings together everything that I'm passionate about. So there is kind of an entrepreneurial side of it, but there's also the photographic artistic part, which I love. So in this project, I really see kind of combining everything. So it's an association as a general thing, and it is something that we want to continue expanding further. But in this first moment, there's like this project. I say we because I mean I developed the whole project design and the whole idea of the concept of the project. But then in December, I got someone that is actually Marina, who is a menstrual coach. She jumped on board with me, and we're kind of making everything happen together, which is super nice to have someone that,
is that like a partner?
Exactly. So she has been my business partner. So she jumped on board in the end of December, and it has been magnificent to have someone to actually share this journey with. So when I say we, I think us as a team, and now we also have partners and an advisory board. But anyway, going back to the core of what it is, this first project that we're actually doing underneath the unboxing cycle. So it's actually, so we started on the beginning of winter, right? As I mentioned before, which I mean, I'm guessing your listeners by now, they probably know about this.
Inner winter, inner summer. Yeah.
Exactly. So we have the 4 phases of the cycle. Exactly. We have the 4 phases of the cycle, and each phase is compared to one of the seasons of nature. And then winter is the menstruation, and then the first day of our menstruation, which is the first day of the winter, if we would compare it to nature, is the first day of our cycle, right? So symbolically, the project started in the first day of the winter in December on the solstice, and it's gonna last exactly. So it's gonna last until the end, so until the beginning of the next winter. So to really follow the seasons of the year, and we're gonna be using nature as the landscape for the photography part. So that's like one of the parts. There's like three parts of the project. So one of them, and in the whole year, we have a focus group of 12 menstruating women living in different parts of Switzerland. So they are actually the models for the pictures, but they're also co-creating the second thing of the project that I'm still gonna come to that. So coming back to the photography part, there we are actually these 12 girls inside of this cycle of this year. They're understanding their own cycle, they're tracking and understanding who they are in each phase of their cycle, what are the needs, who are they? Like I even gave them the idea in the beginning that they actually really personify each of these women that live inside them, maybe giving even a name and kind of like who are they, what's they need, what kind of energy they spread around. So that in each season of the year, we're going to portray each phase of each woman. So now we're winter, so we're talking about who are they when they menstruate. And then we have a chat. They tell me, we have like some words, and we have a bit of a co-creation moment that we think, how could we portray that mood or who they are in a photography out in nature? So the idea is to really use nature in each season as the landscape to portray how women experience each phase of their cycle out there.
Wonderful. Very
so
cool.
that's the Exactly. So that's the photography part of it, which is the artistic part. And then in March 2025, we're going to have an exhibition showing these 12 images per season, aka per phase, to then also create an offline room to educate people about what is the menstrual cycle and how each woman actually experiences the menstrual cycle in a very different way. And it has been super interesting. Like now is the winter, and I had the talk with all of them. I only started creating with one of them, but now we have the shootings coming up next week as well. And it's so interesting, like each one really experiences in a completely different way. And so for each woman, we have a different way of portraying that in nature. And then the idea of the exhibition in March 25 is really to have an inspiring place and not a place that people feel uncomfortable. Because sometimes if you have certain art, like if you show a lot of blood or if you show a lot of certain things, men or not menstruators or kids, they might feel a bit intimidated by it and not really feel that comfortable. So the idea is actually to use more kind of a subtle way of showing it and educating. So the idea in this offline space with the exhibition is also to bring everyone in. So men, kids, schools, anyone to kind of come in and understand what is the cycle in an interactive way as well. So that's the artistic part of the project.
It's amazing.
And then I'll explain you everything, and then we can still like kind of jump in to the specific ones. I think it's a bit easier. Then the second one is we first thought about like really creating a journal. I mean, there are a lot of journals out there and a lot of apps, but you said it yourself also in the app that you're developing, right? Like a lot of the apps nowadays, they really focus only on the menstruation and ovulation, right? Like fertility.
Not in our app, but yes.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. Like you spotted that, and you're creating an app that is exactly focusing on the entire cycle. Exactly. That's what I meant. But because most of the apps existing nowadays are still focusing only on one or the other. So like pretty much the days that you bleed, that is the kind of the physical thing that you see. Or if you want or don't want to get pregnant.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of, and it's very like clinical as well. It's a clinical approach to menstruation. And
exactly.
Ignoring the rest of the cycle.
Exactly. So then this focus group, they are kind of testing the different options like apps and also journals, physical journals. And we're co-creating a journal that takes into account also different lifestyles. So in the focus group, we have a mix of people. So people like between 20, our youngest is 25 and our oldest is 39. And some of them are like single entrepreneur, others are moms with 2 kids, self-employed. The other one like works in a company, but is a lot outdoors and doing like ski tours and things like that. You have a semi-professional athlete. So like very different lifestyles. And the
Yeah.
idea is that we co-create a solution that is also reasonable and doable for the majority of the realities, right?
Nice.
So that's kind of the second solution. So there will be kind of there's another idea in the parallel running to make it a bit bigger, but I think in the scope of the project, because we have a lot of other things also happening in parallel, we're just going to do kind of a simplified journal version co-created by these women throughout the year, and then possibly also a book of the exhibition with the photographies and everything to explain the cycle in a more artistic way. So that's the second solution. And the third one is a digital hub. So we're still focusing more on a website for the first moment to actually have a bit of kind of a digital encyclopedia about the menstrual cycle. So you can go there and you can find out about like different tips and tricks and see existing period brands, buy some of the products as well, but then also go like see research. And so really kind of really have a hub that you can go and wherever you are in your knowledge, you can either get like super basic information. Also, for example, men that want to understand more about it, there's going to be like a section. But if you're also more into it, but you know your cycle already, but you still want to go more deeper into nutrition or sports or whatever it is, there's going to be like content for everyone, but kind of curating the existing content, because nowadays, I mean, you know that there's so many things going on, but still people don't really know where to start. Like they don't know how to get there.
We're seeing that a lot in like perimenopause and menopause. There's been this explosion, as we all know, of like content and information and resources and apps and everything, right? Like just everything. Doctors talking about it. It's all over social media. Suddenly it's everywhere. And like, where do you go when you really like need to, like you said, I love what you're doing with unboxing cycles. Like start at super beginner level or advanced, you know all about your hormonal cycle and how your hormones are impacting you. And you've already had a hormonal, like, you know, you've already done your blood tests and you know which ones you need. Like it's really daunting to figure out where to go to like get the information. And at the end of the day, with the perimenopause stuff, you got to like throw a dart and find your favorite content creator and follow them, right? Or like keep looking and searching, but it's overwhelming. In some ways it's a good problem to have, but it can be overwhelming.
Exactly. And then at the end of the day, sometimes like because it's so overwhelming, you end up not looking at anything because you're like, I don't know. And you just like,
just forget it. When I have 3 hours again, I'll do more research. Yeah.
So the idea is really like kind of filter it up and also use like smart filter options and search functions that you can actually also find what you're looking for. And if you don't know what you're looking for, that we can recommend you what you can look for in that way. So partly we will create some content, but it will be also a huge curation of existing content and also kind of having a map of like, you know, coaches and doctors and where can you go if you have which problem. So that the idea is really to consolidate everything in one platform and make it accessible to everyone, because we also see as a topic that shouldn't only be talked about in the menstruators community, but that it actually should also open up for the ones that don't menstruate. Because if we can have an open dialogue, if men, for example, understand what it is all about, there will be less friction and more understanding in the workspace, at home, in every environment, really.
Yeah, I love it. I wish I could come to the exhibition when you have that.
Well, you can. It's in March 2025. Do you know Switzerland?
No.
There you go. A great reason to come.
Sorry. Yeah, no, I mean, it sounds like it's going to be a really special thing. I love how artistic your approach is to this and educational. I have someone or a website you could also check out. It's called sisterseasons.com for anyone that's listening as well. And they're doing this kind of very like nature aligned menstrual cycle awareness as well. And that's an entrepreneur I know here from Atlanta who's been working on it. And I just think it's so important for us to support each other in these endeavors, this very, very important work that we're doing.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I also came to realize starting in this whole topic, I feel like, for example, in the more, let's say, spiritual community, there is a lot of knowledge about, also syncing the menstrual cycle with the moon, with nature, and all of that kind of knowledge.
Yeah.
But if you bring too much mysticism to it, the modern woman, she gets a bit like, I don't want to hear about that. Like, that's not my world. So I think it's kind of a thing of also finding that middle ground of getting that knowledge, but in a more factual and kind of day-to-day, let's say, like modern way thing.
I agree. 1,000%. I agree. Yeah.
So
I know, like in my training, it was made very clear it's a psycho-spiritual approach, and that's not on my website. That's not, like I don't advertise that because it'll put people off, right? But it is, what's not spiritual about understanding yourself and inhabiting your body on this level, but I totally agree. You got to walk a line with that because we want to spread this as far as we can, and
and getting like, it's also super interesting. Like the other day as well, I met a girl that she does free bleeding for 5 years now, which is also a super interesting concept, which for the modern woman is like really hard to even grasp at that, right? Like, because they're also so induced on kind of menstrual products and that's it, and that's going to resolve our problems, or like just use painkillers so that you can just go through it, and that's it. Exactly. And that's also not about that, right? But this whole thing about free bleeding was super interesting. She was telling me that she's like, she can do it, like she's been doing it for 5 years, but she has to have like this master awareness about her body so she can actually feel it and hold it. And then I told her, I was like, she was like, I really, when I'm super tired and I'm stressed, like I don't do it. I just put a period product because my body, like I'm just tired and I cannot keep that awareness the whole time. But then I told her, I was like, it's like when we learn how to go to the bathroom to pee, we also we had like 5-6 years until we actually learn how to hold it, right? So it's super interesting, like if you actually go to that. And then she said if she has a daughter, she would teach the daughter right in the beginning, because then you can actually go your whole life without using menstrual products.
It's amazing. And so
how
good
crazy that thought is.
So good for the planet.
Exactly.
But that's really cool.
No one talks about it either.
They don't. And like I use do you know Flex Disc, those discs now?
Yes. Right? Yeah.
And that's kind of recent-ish on the market here in the States for them to be like widely available. And those things let me go 10 hours, not even thinking about it, and I'm always like, I love them, but I feel guilty. I feel like I'm not making it go away. I'm not altering my experience, but I'm not having to deal with this, super convenient for the modern woman, but also like, is it the best for my cyclical awareness? Probably not. But a great product.
But at the end of I think at the end of the day as well, it comes to the point of, and also that's one of the objectives also of the exhibition, is to really show that each woman goes with it in a different way. And some women cannot use a disc, cannot use a moon cup, and they really like to use pads. Why not? If you like that, like if that's what you feel comfortable with, then go with it. Of course, try then to choose plastic-free pads that are more to the environment, but to your body as well. That's something that I learned big time when I was working in the startup, is how the the let's say normal, or like the widely spread menstrual pad or tampons, how much chemicals and plastic are in there. And if you think that our vulva or the vagina is like one of the most absorbent organs in our body,
Yeah.
think about everything that it's absorbing from these chemicals and these plastics, and this is horrible for our health. And this is also something that is not really talked about. So it's not even, it's about the environment, but also about your health and your microorganism and everything, right? And it was really interesting when I was working in that company. We one of the founders, she went to a pharmacy and she wanted to test out a little bit, like also the knowledge of pharmacists and everything. And she's like, do you have like a cotton pad? And she's like, cotton pad? Well, I have to check what we have. Or like, do you have a plastic-free cotton pad? And then she went and then she brings back this pink, I don't remember the brand it was, but this pink plastic package. It was written, feels like cotton, super big. And then she gave it to her and she's like, we have this one. And then the founder was like, okay, thank you. And then she took it home. And then there's like, it feels like cotton. And there's like this little asterisk that takes you to the like really fine printing, which is written, this product does not contain cotton.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, we have a serious issue going on here.
Big time. Yeah. Wow.
So yeah, there's so many different layers, and also the fact that period products don't have to put the ingredients in the packaging. There are so many things that are just completely distorted.
Yeah.
I have to laugh. It's super sad, but I have to laugh because it's like, come on, we're in 2024 and this is still happening.
Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy. And your particular experience and expertise with working in industry like that is really really valuable. Like it puts you in a position of being a really valuable advocate for doing better, making better and doing better.
Yeah, we try what we can, right? You know that as well.
Yeah.
We do what we can with what we have, pretty much.
Well, in closing, what would be a piece of advice? If I'm sure you'll love this question, but let's say for someone that is just starting on their cyclical awareness journey, or they're getting like menstrual cycle curious, what would be some advice that you would give them when embarking on that journey?
I think my first advice is exactly that: be curious. Be curious to get to know yourself. Be curious to understand what is out there, what are the options, and just really research and read about it. But I think the main element to learn about it is to actually be curious about it. And I mean, it's a journey, because it's for you to really understand who are you in each of your phases, and also accept that, and also talk openly about it. It's not something that we're used to. So I think the main point is really like, just be curious, and if you're curious, you're automatically going to start looking for it, and you're going to start trying to see patterns and see things that you're experiencing and exchanging with people. And then from there, it's just going to go. Yeah, it's just like you're going to automatically dive into this journey. But of course, tracking is the first step, to understand who are you and what, if there are any patterns. And the thing is also, it's not tracking one cycle that you're going to understand everything, right? Like you need at least 3 cycles to actually start seeing patterns, or seeing how your body actually works in a physically and mentally perspective. So yeah, I think that's the best thing.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your time today, Maja.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. And I hope that your listeners can get some inspiration and get some takeaways from it.